WWI Blood Money, U.S. Empire's Lone Empire in 1914. As Europe descended into fire and mud, the United States stood an ocean away, officially neutral. It's untouched by trenches, untouched by gas, untouched by mass conscription. But neutrality, as it turned out, did not mean innocence. While soldiers bled in Flanders and the Somme, a different kind of machinery was spinning at full speed across the Atlantic, one made of contracts, interest rates, and promises written in ink instead of blood. The First World War would not just redraw borders, it would quietly reorder global power. At the center of that shift was money. Before the war, the world's financial heart did not beat in Washington or New York. It beat in London. For over a century, Britain had been the world's banker, its empire lubricated by capital flowing through the city of London. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. British banks financed railways in India, ports in Africa, and governments across Europe. The United States, by contrast, was still a debtor nation, industrializing rapidly. Yes, but borrowing heavily from European capital to fuel its growth. In 1913, just 1 year before the war, American banks owed more to Europe than Europe owed to them. Then came August 1914. As Europe mobilized millions of men, it also mobilized unimaginable sums of money. Now, modern industrial war was brutally expensive. Rifles, artillery shells, uniforms, railways, food, everything had to be produced at scale, continuously, relentlessly. Britain and France burned through gold reserves at a staggering pace. Their factories could not meet demand alone, so they turned west. At first, the United States tried to maintain the appearance of neutrality. Officially, it could trade with both sides. In reality, Britain's naval blockade made commerce with Germany nearly impossible. American wheat fed Allied soldiers, American steel became Allied weapons. American factories roared day and night, supplying a war the U.S. was not yet fighting, but trade alone was not enough. By 1915, Britain and France were running out of cash. Gold shipments crossed the Atlantic, draining European vaults to pay American suppliers. When that gold began to run thin, a new solution emerged: loans. This is where the war quietly changed direction. J.P. Morgan & Co., already one of the most powerful financial institutions in the world, became the primary purchasing agent for Britain and France in the United States. It negotiated massive contracts, coordinated suppliers, and most importantly, arranged credit. American banks began lending to the Allies on a scale never seen before. By the time the United States entered the war in 1917, American banks had extended more than $2 billion in private loans to the Allied powers, a colossal sum for the era. Neutrality by this point was largely theoretical. The financial system had chosen a side. This created a dangerous imbalance. If the Allies lost the war, there was a real possibility that they would default on their debts. American banks, deeply exposed, had a vested interest in Allied victory. The war was no longer just a distant conflict. It was embedded in balance sheets, pension funds, and the stability of the U.S. financial system itself. When the United States formally entered the war in April 1917, it did so not only as a military power, but as the world's creditor-in-chief. The U.S. government took over lending directly, extending more than $10 billion in loans to its allies by the war's end. Europe fought with American money, American food, and American industrial output. When the guns finally fell silent in 1918, the battlefield was littered with ruins, but the real reckoning was financial. Europe was devastated. Entire regions of France and Belgium were reduced to rubble. Millions were dead or wounded. Economies were shattered. And towering above the wreckage was an enormous web of debt. Britain and France owed the United States vast sums. Germany, under the Treaty of Versailles, was forced to pay reparations to the Allies. Those reparations were meant to help Britain and France pay their debts to the United States. Money now moved in a grim circle. Germany borrowed from American banks to pay reparations. Britain and France used those payments to repay American loans. The United States collected interest at every step. It was a system that looked stable on paper, but in reality was fragile, punitive, and deeply resented. When the global economy faltered in the late 1920s, that system collapsed spectacularly, helping to trigger the Great Depression and setting the stage for another world war. But even amid the chaos, one transformation was irreversible. By 1919, the United States was no longer a debtor nation. It was the world's largest creditor. New York had overtaken London as the center of global finance. The dollar began its slow ascent toward reserve currency status. American banks, industries, and institutions now shaped the flow of global capital. Power had crossed the Atlantic not through conquest, but through credit. This was the birth of a new kind of empire. It's not an empire of colonies and governors, but one of balance sheets and leverage. Loans replaced legions. Interest replaced imperial administrators. Influence flowed not from flags planted in foreign soil, but from obligations written into national budgets. The First World War had proven that financial power could be as decisive as military force and far more enduring. The echoes of this system are still with us today. Modern institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank operate on similar principles: liquidity in times of crisis, conditional support, long-term influence. The US dollar remains the backbone of global trade. Treasury bonds are still treated as the safest asset on earth, and when crises strike, weather wars, recessions, or pandemics, capital flows toward American financial markets, reinforcing the same gravitational pull established over a century ago. The story of World War I is often told through trenches, treaties, and generals. But beneath the mud and metals was another battlefield, quiet, abstract, and enormously consequential. A battlefield of loans and ledgers, where the outcome reshaped the global order. The United States did not emerge from the First World War as an empire by accident. It emerged because war turned money into power, and power into permanence. While Europe paid in blood, America learned how to rule through debt. And once that lesson was learned, the world would never be the same.